This isn't your soft launch. This is the hard launch, where we talk about what it takes to build love, businesses, and everything in between. Zvi, it is so great to have you on the hard launch. Thank you so much for doing this. I am so happy to get into your background, your story, what you're building, and I'm super excited to share that with our audience. So thank you again for coming on, and let's get into it.
Let's go.
Cool. So I want to rewind the clock a little bit and talk to me about how entrepreneurship was modeled for you maybe early on, if at all. And was this something that was in your kind of DNA growing up, or is this something you kind of realized perhaps later in life?
It's a good question. I've always enjoyed like creating and doing things on my own and pushing the boundaries of what people say is possible and what they say is not possible. Me, like a lot of other entrepreneurs, like we thrive off of someone telling us that can't be done. And having done things like that, lucky or however, and have gotten things done where people said they couldn't be done, you realize that after a while you just have to dismiss that and look at that type of a comment as an opportunity. Perhaps the reason why this exists or this opportunity exists in my head or in someone else's head can be because most people believe that it can't be done. And so, if you start looking at things through that lens, and as soon as people say that, the light dings in my head. I'm like, okay, we might have an opportunity here. Um, and because the truth of the matter is, looking at numbers of companies, most fail. So it kind of allows people to feel some sort of comfort in their statement. Oh, it's not going to work. I kind of take that as let's look into this. This could get exciting, especially if everyone thinks it can't work. Then you really might be, onto something. And I've always kind of liked that, and then couple that with the fact that, I like working for myself. It's a different type of life in every aspect when you have to wake up in the morning and be at work at a certain time and don't have flexibility that perhaps you might want, for whatever reasons. I personally love to spend time with my small son. Okay. So in that case, if I'm working for somebody, the ability to get in the hours I want with my son are hampered somewhat. If I work for myself, I can do whatever I want. If I want to come home every day at 5 and spend time with him from 5 to 7, that's great. But then I have to go back to the office at 7, but at least you have that flexibility. And so, coupled with those two aspects, I'm an entrepreneur all the way through. I don't see myself, you never say never, but the rest of my life, I don't see myself as a salaried employee working for anybody else, if that means
Once you
anything.
build, yep, I totally agree. Once you start building, there's no going back. I feel the same way. I come from a corporate background, and going from that to experiencing building your own thing it's the most challenging journey, but also the most fulfilling and rewarding. And there truly is nothing like it. So I completely can relate. What was your inflection point where you realized, I'm going to build something like this is, I don't want to kind of go down a more traditional path, but like I want to build and I'm going to go for it. Was there an inflection point or was it sort of more of a journey?
In this business or in general?
In general, really.
It just again, it was the realization one day that, I'd rather just work for myself. I there comes a point when you realize, if you've been lucky like I have, very, very lucky and fortunate, and you got to just thank God every day for it, where you've had the luck of being taught by amazing people and great mentors and worked for people in industry that took the time to show me, not to give me directions, but to show me the hows and the whys of the way things work. That allows you after a while to be like, well, you've already showed me everything and I've done a lot for you and I've worked for you a long time. There comes a point where you're like, you know what, I could really, in the beginning, maybe do it for myself, or work for myself. And, I'm a very, very loyal person. So of course I would always wait for their blessing, before I ever made a move like that. But again, I've just been so lucky with my mentors in life and the people I've worked for. They really took the time to show me how. It wasn't like, Zvi, do this, or Zvi, do that. Like, here, Zvi, do this. Well, why are we doing it this way? Let me explain why. And you take the time. You get lucky enough to have those type of mentors who take the time to literally walk you through, you know, the way things work, and how business works, and what's important and what's not as important, and how to balance your schedule. And when they show you all of that, and if you really take the time to listen, it puts you in a very strong position to go out on your own eventually. You know, and just one day I just realized, I'm like, I don't even need this guy sitting next to me anymore. He, when I realized that one of my old bosses just wouldn't even come in anymore, he's like telling all of his clients, just talk to Zvi. I'm like, that just means that he has, as much confidence in me as he possibly can. And he's like, he feels like I can run his business, maybe not as good as him, but he certainly doesn't feel like he's missing a beat in any way. And as soon as I started realizing that, I'm like, I might have this. Maybe it's time to, take a risk and go it on your own. And that happened early on in my career. So, I've been kind of on my own for a long, long time now.
And it's so true. I think the value of having the right mentors, the right advisors along the way is so understated. It is so important to have the right people to take you under their wing and really show you how, not just what. And it
It's
sounds
so
like that's
important.
exactly
It's
what you
so
had.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you evaluate, you know, risk long term or even short term, sort of as you think about being an entrepreneur? A lot of people that listen to this podcast are, perhaps folks that are considering moving from a corporate to building and going down the founder route. How do you think about risk and taking on that level of risk, right? It is quite depending on where you are in life, you have a family. I also myself have a family, right? That means that the risk is evaluated in a much different way. But how do you think about that? And how maybe did you think about that when you were starting out, starting to build, starting to go down the path of going out on your own?
I think that when you factor in risk as an entrepreneur, and not that you should be completely like oblivious to risk, because you of course have to, be cognizant of it. I feel like there's if no matter what you do as an entrepreneur, no matter where you are in life, whether you have a family, whether you don't have a family, I don't think that changes the risk. If you allow that to change the risk, then you already put it this way, you're already a huge underdog as an entrepreneur. You start, putting in risk factors, then you don't have a chance in a lot of cases. I mean, the more risk you start evaluating, the less likely you're going to be able to do anything. Because what is the reality of being an entrepreneur? And you see these cartoons and memes every day, but like the good day is like the storm in Forrest Gump, where like he's in a hurricane and the boat's gonna the boat's gonna fall, and that's a good day, because at the end of the day, you're the only one responsible for anything that's happening. And if you have a payroll, then you're doubly responsible. And if you have investors, you're now triply responsible. And there's always going to be risk. And you have to basically say, number one, you have to say to yourself, this is what I want to do. This is what's going to make me happy. And this is where I feel the opportunity is right now. And again, you can't go in blindly. Like, I don't just say, all right, go start a business, have at it. Do research, understand the market, understand if there's a potential here. If all that stuff adds up, then regardless of whether or not you have a family, you either going to go for it or not going to go for it. And, I think that, I've known the most successful entrepreneurs to be both have 5 kids and be completely single. It all depends on what you're willing to put in and what your support system is willing to deal with. If you have a family that's like, we're behind you, then you're going to be in a much stronger position than the other side of that coin. Right. And to me, like, this whole business, like my old life was in finance and things like that. When I stumbled upon this business, it was by accident, you know, before I ever really decided to do a deep dive into it and really go for it. I was going to do 4, 5, 6 months of research before I ever decided to incorporate and do things like that. Because that to me is that if it passes that first 4, 5, 6 month test, and you really see that there's an opportunity, well, then my risk has already been evaluated. Then I can go for it. Whether or not it's going to work or not, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's life, but if you do your back checks and if you do your research and your homework, I know it sounds so cliche and silly, but if you do that and you really still feel like there's an opportunity, then you have to either go for it or not. And at that point, whatever risk there is, there's going to be risk in everything that you do. And so you have to just, move forward and either be willing to lose, not be afraid to get kicked and fall down. That's another fear people have. I don't have that fear. You can't grow without falling, I believe, in business. So I think that's just kind of the answer. Like the risk to me, the more risk there is, the more opportunity there is. The same, going back to what I said earlier, it can't be done, more risk, right? Not necessarily hand in hand, but the harder it is for people to see it, the likely riskier it is that it's going to work. I mean, you can look at it that way. I just see that as opportunity. If I do my homework and get a different answer, then I view it as a significant opportunity. And I like that. I like the risks like that because, there's a nice, if you do it right and you're right, good pot of gold at the other end of it. And it's just the most, and that's even, and the pot of gold is like the least rewarding factor of it. There's just so much of an emotional satisfaction that you get from building something that no one else saw. Like it just feels good. And then when you talk about this business now, Reloom, the reaction that the people get and the graciousness and the thankfulness of the people when you talk to them and give them the product, there's nothing like it. The business part of it almost it's so far in the rearview mirror you don't even pay attention to it. That's that this is something new to me, but it's by far the most rewarding experience that I've ever had in terms of business.
That's amazing. And I want to get into Reloom in a second, but you mentioned doing your homework and the kind of several months of kind of diving in, really understanding the market. Is that how you started? Is that what you did? Because you also talked about how was kind of an accidental, you stumbled upon this business. So can you talk me through kind of, did you take that time to do the market research and really understand the space? Or did it move a lot faster because it was a little bit accidental?
So the original plan was the company was called Campus VR in the very beginning, and because we would go on a campus and we would put it in VR, and that's what the idea was. The way that idea happened was I was talking to my own children at the time they were 12 and 10 about college, trying to plant those seeds, um, and I was telling them where I went to college, which is Binghamton University. It's a state school in New York. It's one of the good ones. It was then. Now it's better than it was then, even. But I was telling them like it's a great experience. I met my best friends in life there. I'm still friends with these people 30 years later. It set me up to be successful in my career path, whatever I wanted to do. And it was a gorgeous campus, and I wanted to show off the campus to them. And I went on the web page, and again, nothing against Binghamton because it is a beautiful place and an amazing school and everything like that. But the web page did not get my kids, who were 12 and 10, excited at all. It was a picture of a building. There was text scrolling across the screen, and my kids were within 3 seconds, "Dad, this is boring. We don't want to watch this." And I was like, wow, that's, and Binghamton's a good school. They should have something better, I thought. And I looked around at other schools and I found similar type of quote unquote virtual tours. And I was like, there has to be a better way, with something like this. So, I started, thinking how will I know what will be better? And the first thing I realized is, look, I was in my 40s now. And I was like, I need to get in touch with and be in tune with, let's say, today's youth, because they're the ones that are going to be going to these sites to see the VR tours. So I took a spot in a WeWork space here in New York City, because that's where we're based out of. I happened to get one of the buildings that had 8 floors of this is when WeWork was like booming. 8 floors of WeWork companies. They're all basically startups, 95% startups. And I took a space, in like the May area of time, so right as internships were flowing like crazy, May, June, July, August, even September, October. And I would literally walk around and I would go to every single one of these companies. I became friendly with them. because I was, I'm that type of a person anyway. And I would ask, can I borrow your intern, one, two, or three interns or whatever, and ask them, I'll have them back in a half hour, or less. And I would come, I would ask them questions, and I would show them what currently exists, and I would describe what I would try to do and what I would want to do. And I started to see right away, and I did about 500 of these interviews. So like I really took 6 months to go through this as hardcore as I can to basically get data through interview. Um, you know, I just happened to be in a place where I had access to, 500, you know, kids between the ages of, let's just say, 17 and 21. And, they were all willing to talk and they loved it and they were going through it. And when I came out of it and I looked at everything that I had, I'm like, no wonder that no one likes these tours, because everything that they're asking for doesn't really exist. And so what I did then was I did a very, very quick demo of something that they sort of described to me. And then I showed it to them. And their reactions were so off the charts that I realized I had something. And that's when I was like, okay, time to really dive in. Let's go build a robot. I learned that, from these kids, I learned that point and click model doesn't work for today's youth at all. They get bored. They're not interested. They hit a button. It goes to somewhere they don't like. They tune out immediately. You learn about this, 4 or 5 second, you know, uh, what is it called? I forgot what it's called, but that's all that they can like look at right at one time. And you just go from there. And I set out, I built robots. I started, getting ready to launch. By the time I finished my robot where it was okay to roll through a college, I thought, COVID hits. And so I'm just now stuck in New York City during COVID. We were like the center of it and everything was shut down, but except for the phone lines. So I got to call colleges around the country and talk to admissions officers who were in their house and were just dying to talk at that point. And as the months went on, they realized, what, as soon as things open up anywhere, we're going to want you to do this for us. We have lost a lot of revenue. People are questioning the value of a college education. There was all of that stuff. And, as soon as things started opening up, I started getting calls from, all parts of this country. And I was doing, VR campus tours. And then, from there, it just became like the athletic departments at these schools started seeing what I was doing for admissions departments. And, the athletic departments, they're in the most cutthroat business. And, my first clients were, Duke basketball and Connecticut basketball. Pretty soon I had a lot of the gorillas in the industry all using me to recruit, both for admissions and for athletics. And that kind of went on and on and on for years and still going on. I'm still getting calls from these people. Some of these schools I've become friends with the coaches. I've been partners with them for so long at a lot of the schools. And, that brings me to Reloom. I mean, I don't know like how far you want me to go into this right now, but, you know, I doing that for 5, 6 years, and like I said to you, like I need to do my research. The only time in my life that I didn't do research, and before I went into an industry, was with Reloom, with the events part of things, because the way that happened was so accidental and so like, you know, piano falling on my head like in the cartoons. Um, I'm literally sitting there having a drink with one of my closest friends from Binghamton University. And he tells me that his father is in failing health. He's not going to be around much longer. And he goes on to tell me that what he's going to miss the most about his dad is watching the New York Giants with his father on Sunday afternoons during football season. To the point where he was like, we used to plan vacations around football season so that we never missed watching a game together. And it's a deeply touching thing that he was saying to me. We were talking about it because unfortunately I had just lost my mother, may her soul rest in peace, a few months earlier. And so, I understood that there were certain things, and everyone knows this, there's certain things of your parents that you're going to miss more than others. And he was like, listen, I need you to do me a favor. I was like, what's that? He's like, I need you to come to my house on Sunday, video us watching the game together, roll out with us to the patio when he's drinking and he's barbecuing and we're having fun, and then roll out in the street with us when he's playing catch with his grandkids and with my nieces and my nephews. And then I want you to take that footage and put it in the headset for me so that I always have this day. I was like, "Oof, okay, well, I never did anything like that. But of course, you're one of my closest friends. I'm happy to do it for you." Anyway, I come over the next week. I do exactly that. Give it to him in a headset. His father passes away, unfortunately, about a month later. It was expected, but it doesn't ease the pain whatsoever. And a week or two after that, he calls me up one Sunday morning. It's during football season. He's hysterical, crying, and I said, "What's wrong, man?" He's just like, "Nothing." I'm like, "Well, if nothing's wrong, why are you crying on the phone to me?" And he says, "Look, I just put the headset on that you gave me." He goes, "I watched for about 20 minutes." He goes, "For those 20 minutes, I forgot that my father had passed away." He goes, "It was like he was back alive with me." He goes, "When I took the headset off and reality set back in that I was just basically time traveling, to a few months ago." He's like, "All these emotions got stirred up in me and I haven't been able to stop crying." He's like, "But listen," he goes, "don't confuse my tears for any kind of sadness." He's like, "This is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me, and you need to do this for other people." He's like, "You just gave me the ability to relive a moment with a loved one who's no longer here." I get the chills when I talk about this story. A, because it's one of my closest friends, but B, I remember the conversation perfectly. I've told this story like 100 times already. Um, he's like, "You have to do this for other people." "This is priceless." And I right away thought back, like, well, what would I give to have this with my own mother? Anything. Like, there'd be nothing that I wouldn't give for that. Um, and I hung up the phone with him, and I was like scratching my head, and I was like, "What? How do you get into the market of people are about to die?" Like, it's a weird market. Even to think about that is weird. But in the same breath, I thought to myself, well, what other things do people like to memorialize, or would like maybe to memorialize? Weddings. Yeah, of course. Any kind of party that commemorates a milestone of life, whether it be a sweet 16 or a bar bat mitzvah or wedding or 50th birthday party or anything, anything. Why would they not want the ability to actually relive it versus watching it on tape or looking at a picture of it? And I was like, that sounds like a good idea in my head. And I don't have time for research because I have to figure out if this is going to work, it's going to work. I'm not taking 6 months now to look into it. Um, so what ends up happening is I go to a big person in Brooklyn, a big businessman, and I asked him, "What do you think about this idea for weddings and events?" And he said, "It sounds good," and he happens to be a rabbi. But and I said, "What do you think?" I'm like, "Would you think that for free you could convince someone within your congregation to let me, get one of their weddings in VR, and we'll see if we have anything?" And he just said to me, "Look, Zvi, I got one better for you. My daughter is getting married in 3 days. You come, it's going to be a 1,200 person wedding. If you can do that wedding and it comes out good, what wedding can you do?" I was like, he's like, "Okay, now what do you know about weddings?" I said, "Zero. Absolutely nothing do I know about weddings." He's like, "Well, come on through. Don't get in the way, and let's see what happens." I said, "Fine." So I come to the place and I do the wedding. It's wild. 1,200 people, a lot of people for a wedding. And I was like, I'm like, we got what we got. Let's see what happens. 2 weeks later, I go to he has a yeshiva. I go to his yeshiva and I put the headset on him. And remember, this is only 2 weeks ago this wedding happened. The moment he put on the headset, he started shaking and he started crying, and I saw the tears coming down underneath his headset. And he watched, one of the scenes. It was about 7 minutes long, and he pulls the headset down and he says, "This is amazing. I feel like I just went back in time, dropped in as a guest at my own daughter's wedding, and watched myself from the aisle walk her down the aisle." He's like, "My brain has still not wrapped itself around the idea of what I just saw." He's like, "You have to do this for other people." And I was like, "Well, my friend just told me the same thing like a month ago." He's like, "You do." He goes, "This is unbelievable. You need to do this for people." And, from there, he started calling people within his community. Word started to spread, a little bit here, a little bit there. I did a bat mitzvah for, one of these Real Housewives of New York City. Word started to spread more. I started getting calls from other cities. Finally, I was able to get, or finally, I had the confidence to approach, one of the top planners. I'm not going to say her name, but one of the top planners in New York. Because, people kept telling me, like, you better get out in front of this because you're going to have a lot of copycats soon. And I was like, well, other than, the robot has its patent, and there's a lot of things I learned over the years as they relate to VR, uh, you know, and I'm like, so I have an advantage, but I'm like, to really secure a really good advantage would be to have the planners who plan these just incredible, incredible events these days. They're unbelievable. To have them trust you and hire you for their events. So it's not going to be easy to convince them to use someone else in something that they've never heard of if they already trust me. And so I finally, once I got a dozen or so under my belt weddings, one of my friends was able to convince one of these big planners to take a meeting with me, um, under the condition that if she didn't like it after 10 minutes, I'd leave her alone, because I was trying to get a hold of her for a while, which again, I'm not offended by, because I wouldn't take my call either if I were her. And so, she put on the headset, and again, my good fortune, I showed her that first wedding that I just spoke to you about, and she happened to be a guest at that wedding. And she looks and she's like, oh my God, there I am. I can't believe I'm back in the room with myself. And she keeps looking around. She's like, I can't believe I'm back at this wedding. This is unbelievable. And then she looks, she's like, oh my God, this guy here just died last week. And I was like, okay. And she watched, and she pulled down the headset and she's like, I love it. She's like, but you have to come to my house and you need to pitch my client. I said, fine. When? She goes, Sunday. This is on a Thursday. She's like, be there Sunday. I was like, okay, I'll be there. Sunday morning, I go to her house. I pitch her client. They book me right on the spot. I was like, I got something here for sure. And she's laughing. She's like, you're going to be very busy in the next 6 months. Be ready. And she's like, but I want you to wait 15 minutes at my house. I said, oh, okay. I wait 15 minutes. A young guy walks in the door, and she says to him, put on this headset and look at the dance floor of what he's showing you. So he puts on the headset, he's looking. All of a sudden, he becomes totally focused on one image. Again, I can't see what he's looking at, obviously, because it's in this headset. But I can see all of the color in his face drain. And he's watching, and imagine this. I'm standing in the middle of this lady's house. She's talking to her client on the right at a big table. I'm in the middle, and then this young guy is to my left, just wearing a headset. And I'm just standing there. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. 20 minutes go by. He pulls down the headset. You can tell he'd been bawling his eyes out. I didn't see tears, but his eyes were all bloodshot red. And I'm like, what is going on right now? Like, I have no idea. And he looks at me and he says, you just changed my life. And I was like, okay, how did I just change your life? He was like, my father died 2 weeks ago playing pickleball. The last memory of my father was him laying dead on the court and in the hospital. He goes, I just was in a room with my father in this VR at one of the happiest days of his life, dancing around with with me and my brothers. And this is now going to be the way I remember my father. He's like, as a last memory, this is far better than what I was currently dealing with. And he's like, he goes, I can never, ever repay you for that. And he's crying and he's hugging me. And then she's like tearing up and crying. And, she's basically like, with these kind of reactions from people, how do I not offer this to my clients? And again, to her amazing word, and she's been great to me, she does. I've done many, many events with her since then. And this is only like 8 months ago. Not even,
That's amazing. That's
yeah.
wild. The speed at which this all went, I think, is also really something to be emphasized. And it's just wild how, I think you made a point earlier about, the more you analyze risk, kind of the more paralyzed you become. I think it's similar to the more you analyze kind of the pivot of a business or the potential of a product, right? The more paralyzed or resistant you become to where it could organically go. And you kind of just went with where this was flowing organically, right? And I think that is so huge, and really a quality of, like a quality that any entrepreneur or founder should really have and practice, because you never know where it could take you. And this is a testament to that.
The only thing you do know is that the direction you're looking at day one is going to be nowhere near the direction that the company does end up going whenever it ends up going. Like, that is the only
Absolutely.
fact, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can we take a step back and just, can you share what Reloom is and how Reloom works, just for context?
Yeah. So Reloom is our company where we like to keep moments alive forever. So whatever moment you have, reloom, reluminate, relive, like, not just watch again, or not just remind you of, actually reattending an event, reliving a moment as if it's happening again now. The way we laugh about it in our office, we call it moment specific time travel, right? You're literally going back in time and to a moment that you've already had, and you're reliving that moment. So again, you're not going to be able to relive every day of your life, but that moment you are able to relive. And that's where Reloom came from. Like, I realized that, you know, campus VR doesn't really suit the description of what of getting events in virtual reality. So we had to find a new name, and Reloom has really been a lot of people have told me, I love the name, it makes a lot of sense, it's catchy and things like that. I'm like, okay, you know. But yeah, like, you have to be, flexible in your vision. Like, never quit and keep going to the end. But if something tells you, like, look, you're going in a good direction, this can become an insane direction. You have to be willing to pivot. You have to be willing to say, you know what? All right, I didn't think about this. People have told me, oh, this is a genius idea. I go, yeah, I didn't think of it. It's just not, I'm doing this for 5 years. This never even crossed my mind as an idea.
Was there any tinge of fear that you didn't know the wedding industry good enough in order to take this direction or go down this route? Or were you very so convicted in the idea that the vertical kind of didn't really matter, and your kind of experience or background in that vertical was sort of irrelevant to the fact that you had conviction in the product and knew the product so well?
Fear is the wrong word, because I don't really have a lot of fear anyway. Fear is just not in my blood, for better or for worse. I was entirely, I was not, like, fully confident that it was going to work. I knew nothing about the wedding industry. I had a lot of reservations of, should I be the one even doing this in VR? I don't know anything about a wedding. I don't want to interfere in the bride's day. I don't want to interfere. God forbid something happens, when the ceremony's happening, God forbid, like, something happens at any point in the wedding. I don't want to be remembered for screwing up a person's biggest day. That to me was, and that was the biggest difference in terms of doing a college or doing a sports team's facilities versus doing an actual event. Like, the pressure increased by 100, because A, you can't miss it, don't screw it up, and then B, don't cause a scene. So yeah, no, I had no idea. I did no remember, this was the only time in my life I did no research, and along with no research comes a lot of anxiety. But you learn how to be respectful. We get there day one. There's a videographer, a photographer, who almost in every single case have been amazing to work with. And you're like, listen, if I'm ever in your way, don't even look for me. Just move me. You know, get in my shot. I don't care. I don't need what you need, and I'm not here to get in your way. And so yeah. I mean, I was totally unsure of it. Until I delivered that first wedding to the rabbi, and he actually started crying and told me he felt like he went back in time, and this is amazing. At that moment, I realized I need to learn weddings quickly, because I have something. Because you can't fake that. You can't fake that emotional. You can't just give someone something and see them cry, and not say, wait a second, why don't I do this for everybody?
I couldn't agree more. And I love the fact that it so organically happened, right? Because pivots happen to more companies than not. And I think it's really oftentimes completely overlooked because it's the origin story or wherever the product started just sort of gets buried under whatever the success was. But the pivot is what's so important because it does happen most of the time. I'm curious how you thought about scaling given the nature of the product and the fact that, you have to be there, to your point, at the wedding, and you have to show up and you actually have to, get the footage. So how did you guys think about scaling in the early days, and what does that look like more recently?
Well, in the early days, we were trying to figure out how can we possibly scale this, right? The good news, is that when someone hires, one of these amazing photographers or videographers or cinematographers, you're hiring that person, that he or she, for their talents, right? Like this person knows how to capture a video or a scene or an image or whatever. With us, it's not really about that. With us, it's about just getting the robot there, getting him to roll around, capture the whole scene. Now AI even comes into play because AI can help fix certain things that, there are certain scenes people don't want in there, but the AI can come in and fix the scene. Where it's 99% authentic, but the AI has fixed something that's out of sight or out of mind or whatever. Um, and so all we have to do is not all we have to do. What we have to do is to scale it. Is you have to build robots and you have to train people how to use the robots, and then you have to get these robots to other cities. Our idea is if it's big in New York, then why wouldn't it be big in LA? And if it's big in LA, why wouldn't it be big in San Francisco? And then why wouldn't it be big in Miami and Chicago and London and Paris and everywhere? If you're doing a wedding, okay, and again, there's weddings and then there's weddings and everyone's budget's different and God bless everybody. Um, but if you're creating an amazing experience for people, why not why would you not want to be able to relive that experience, reloom that experience, for example? And it became clear right away that, you know, while, yeah, to train people and because, again, if we're going to hire you, you're not going to ever ruin someone's big day. Like that can't be part of the thing. You know, customer satisfaction always is the most important thing. What we deliver to our clients has to be at the top level of standard, or else it's not good enough for me. Um, and when I don't get the oh my god, this is the best thing I ever did, it hurts my feelings. But I get that a lot, like, only because people don't know what to expect. It's funny that way. Um, but um, Look, there are planners in every big city in this country, there are weddings in every big city in this country and in the world. They happen all the time. I used to think weddings were just on Saturdays. How wrong I was. They're every day, Mondays, Tuesdays, every single day there's big weddings. Every single day there's potential clients. For us, we need to build enough robots and make enough contacts within all these cities to where someone can call me from, Park City, Utah and say, all right, Zvi, I have a big event coming up in March. We need you here this, and this day. We've done parties, events in obviously New York, Miami, Los Angeles, Boston, Las Vegas, New Jersey, you name it. We're starting to get out there and we're just beginning. It's hard. It's hard for us. The hardest part about scaling is I can tell you this amazing story, and believe it or not, as good as I can tell it, it doesn't compare to 2 seconds for you to put on a headset and be like, "Oh my God, this is crazy," and that's the truth of the matter. So the hard part is getting and meeting with enough people, and planners are always busy, especially the ones planning these crazy events. It's hard to get them for a few minutes, and you have to be very respectful of their time and not get on their nerves because the day will come where I cross paths with, at one point, all of them. But I don't want them never thinking like, oh my God, here he comes. I can't deal with this guy. You just have to let them be. I understand. I'm the new kid on the block. I have a new product. I've learned that these planners, the higher end ones, they get pitched idea after idea after idea. You don't realize that, but it's true. And you just have to, let things take their course. But, to get back to your question, in terms of scaling, the minute we started to grow in different cities, we just started building robot after robot. We have about a 30 robot army now. We leave 2 in Miami, we leave 1 in Los Angeles. New York has the most of them because this is where our home base is. But Miami of late has started to ramp up very, very nicely, and LA is starting to peek its head up too. We just happen to be here, so if someone from one of these fancy hotels or venues calls me, like, I have a client that wants to see it, can you come by? Either I come by or I send someone to come by, and we show them, and that's great. We're just, at some point, we believe that we can be in a lot of different cities at the same time and do 5, 10, 20 events in a day. Um, I just don't see why not. I just the reactions from my clients has been so overwhelming to the positive that I cannot imagine why this won't catch on. And again, I'm not saying I'm going to be the only one doing it. I don't think I will be, because people are going to want this. But this is going
Absolutely.
to be a new way for people to document their big events in life.
Absolutely. How did you guys go from, you mentioned your background was in finance. How did you go from that to navigating building a product that is so steeped in hardware and both the headset and the robots? How did you navigate building hardware with what it sounds like a very different background?
I People always ask me that, like, is your background in engineering? I'm like, no, it's not. I kind of give the same answer that Marissa Tomei gave in My Cousin Vinny. She's like, my father was the mechanic, his brother was the mechanic. I come from a long line of handymen, mechanics, and people like that build things with their hands. And I just said I'd give it a shot. It was COVID time. We had plenty of time, to build and fine tune. And we went through, 30, 40, 50 versions of the robot before we ever rolled it across a college campus. Just tinkering and time. We had it. So in that case, having all that time and being able to perfect, the kind of robot you would need to navigate a college campus, and eventually weddings and bar mitzvahs and parties and events, it gave us a lot. We got to mix and match with a lot of different parts and build the exact kind of version of something that we wanted. And again, to tell you something else, like, this is we're continuing to make new parts and pieces to robots because we're learning there might be a better way. We're never like going to rest on our laurels, like, oh no, this is perfect, we don't have to do anything. I don't like that mentality. I don't feel like you have to look for something to change, but as soon as you notice something, you're like, let's take advantage of this. And right away we do, and we incorporate that in our newest versions of our robots.
That's amazing. How did you kind of, the luxury wedding industry especially is so relationship based and driven by kind of existing relationships, trust within the industry, knowing one another. It's a small industry and, a lot of folks know one another. How did you crack that? And strategically, what did it mean for you to go straight for a lot of these, luxury planners, rather than maybe a different tier or a different category of planners?
Well, to start, we're not the cheapest product. Not that we're so expensive, but it's not, our product price point is not ultra luxury, but it's a luxury type of an option. So we needed to start at a little bit of a higher tier. Again, not of talent, just of, what type of events people do. Um, and again, a lot of it was based on me playing defense, like exactly what you said. Like, again, this is such a new industry to me, but I've learned very, very quickly that word travels very fast in this industry, like lightning fast. And to gain these people's trust, you have to look at it from the vantage point of, these people have been entrusted with a family's most important day, or with a person's most important day of their life, or one of them, right? And they've entrusted this planner with putting together an event that's gonna, be able to capture that moment in the best possible way, right? So, you know, we realized that for us to get in with that kind of planner, she's got to trust us with not ruining what she's been, or he or she's been entrusted with. And we realized that's going to be very, very tough. And so, it took, like I said earlier, about a dozen weddings before I finally convinced one of these very, very, very higher end planners to even give me a meeting, let alone ever use me. Um, and again, she wasn't willing to just say you're hired. She's like, you have to pitch my client. I'm not pitching you to my clients. Um, to tell you how far we've come, she now doesn't even ask the client. She just says, I need you this in this date, and that's when we're going. Um, yeah, she doesn't even ask him anymore. And even take it further, and again, I'm not going to say her name. I don't need to do that. But I get a call a month ago, 2 months ago, like at midnight, and she's like, Zvi, I'm like, yeah. I need you on this date. Are we good? I'm like, yeah. She's like, okay, talk to you later. Hung up the phone. I was like, put it in the calendar. I'm excited. The next day she called me back. She goes, so we're good for that day, right? I said, yes. She goes, do you want to know the details? I was like, no, I don't care. I'm going to be there. She's like, it's my daughter's wedding. You're my first call. Then she hung up on me. So like, you know, yeah, I loved it too. And I was telling people, and like, you need to tell people that, because if these planners at this level are now using you for their own daughter's wedding, if it's good enough for your kids, it's good enough for your clients. That's the truth, right? If something's good enough for my kid, I recommend it for everybody, where it doesn't necessarily vice versa, um, and that was a good one. And I've done events for the family events for some of the biggest planners in LA. Well, one of the biggest planners in LA, one of the biggest planners in the Miami area, and one of the biggest planners in the New York area. And then the one I just told you about is coming up in a month or two. So like, yeah, the planners are using me for their own family events, which again is such a rewarding thing for me, because, it's just amazing and you said it before, the speed at which this all happened is fantasy land in business. It doesn't work that way. You know, I've done events that it can take someone a decade to get. And I just been so lucky. And, it's so humbling to think that you can do all this work and research and totally miss it. And then, God blesses you anyway on the other side of it by handing you this just, I can't, it's hard to even accept sometimes the level of luck, that was played that has played so far in this company, because it just happens so fast. You have to just take a step back and be as humble as possible, because it's just not supposed to be this way, and again, people will say, wow, what a brilliant idea. And I'm like, it just wasn't, I wish I can take the credit for that, but it just wasn't, if to put it like as crudely as possible, if my friend's father wasn't dying, this never would have happened. Plain and simple.
That's
And
amazing.
it's just unbelievable. I
It
get,
truly is.
yeah. And I thank God every day. And again, I'll never lose fact of, always stay humble, because look how things happen. Like,
Absolutely. What surprised you the most about the wedding industry now that you're inside of it and you're sort of already ingrained in the relationship building with, various planners in the wedding industry? What was something maybe that you didn't expect that surprised you in this industry versus, you know, where the VR came from, campuses, campus tours? How was it different, and what maybe was something that you didn't expect?
two things, if I like off the top of my head. Number one is, um, I never realized, because I've never, my wedding wasn't, planned by anyone crazy. It was a long time ago anyway. But um, the level of detail, the level of intensity, the level of everything that these planners have to deal with and are capable, like, infinitely of dealing with, at that high of a level, is astonishing to me. Like, I've seen a lot of things now. Again, just great fortune, and to have taken or to have participated and been asked to video and VR some amazing, 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 amazing events. And when you look around during an event and you move from room to room to room, and you look at every single little detail that somebody had to pay attention to create, it's like they're creating art. Every single time they create a party, a planner is basically creating art, and they're creating art based on the vision of the client. So the client says, draw me a picture, and this is what I want. And the planner has to take all of that and use all their skills and contacts and vendor knowledge and wedding knowledge to create it for them. And at the end, when it's ready to go, you could have a table of fruit that's 20 feet long and every single grape is in the right place. It's just unbelievable. It's so impressive. I've told planners that. I said, I don't know how you do this. I really have no idea. And they all give me the same answer. We're perfectionists, that's what they say. And so like that to me it's such a talent. I don't know how they do it, and I'm glad it's not me doing it, put it that way. The second You better believe it. You better believe it. And like, the way that these weddings are more and more elaborate, it's just I don't know how they do it. Again, happy it's not me, glad that it's them. I always say to them, you create this amazing moment, I'll keep it alive forever. My job is easier than yours, period. Um, and then the other part that really surprised me is how much the emotional connection of a moment can mean to people, you know? Not that I don't know that, because I do, but when you see people watching these videos and they cry and they go wild, and we have video after video after video of people putting on the headset for the first time and reliving their event, and the reactions are almost universal. I mean, they really are. Like, the people go wild, and I get four answers whenever. What do you like most about this VR? Answer number one, you know, when our children will be able to attend our wedding, even though they're not alive right now. Like, that's, imagine, like, you can go back, be at your parents' wedding, not watch it, be at it, be at the altar with your parents, but X amount of years earlier. Um, you get the flip side of that, which is the same kind of story as my friend's father. There are going to be people that are no longer with us anymore, but now you always have the moment with them forever, whether it's, father dancing with daughter or whatever it is, you have that forever, will be alive. I think, and then now, because these events are so elaborate and are so intense, a lot of times it's actually happening more and more now. Um, Couples are coming up to me and saying, this is the first time we feel like we actually attended our own wedding, because they miss so much of it, right? That, like, they're like, we didn't even know that three-quarters of this stuff, even happened.
I didn't get to eat my food at my wedding. I mean, that was I don't even know what the food looked like. I don't know what people I mean, we did the tasting ahead of time, but would have loved to see what people were getting, and I didn't. And it's amazing how much you miss when you're actually in it.
And that's it. That's exactly right. And there's also parts that happened, but you weren't even there. So like when a couple's making a grand entrance, they don't know how excited the people are to see them in the room. That's very touching to them. It's like literally they will look for that. And a couple will, when I'm at the altar with them, in the headset, they don't want to watch themselves getting married again. They want to watch the crowd and everyone's reactions. So they'll watch that, like, look, oh my God, this person's crying. That you will now notice. Well, you miss most. You have to miss most, right? Um, and then we get like, thank God you did this, because my grandmother lives in another country and she's too sick to travel. Now we're going to be able to give it to her as if she was actually there. So because it means so much to so many people, the ability to put them back at that moment, it's just it's not that I should be surprised, but the extent to the level of appreciation has surprised me. It's intense.
Absolutely. How do you see immersive tech and sort of visualization reshaping this industry, the wedding industry, over the next decade, beyond just what, not just, but beyond what Reloom maybe is doing? How do you see the role of, visualization, immersive tech, even AI reshaping this industry if you were to look, 5, 10 years down the road?
Well, I don't know that I'm the right person to ask since I've only been in this industry 7, 8 months or so. I don't I'm not a big fan of anyone ever trying to fight against technology. I've seen every time someone tries to fight technology, they lose. Um, I feel like, Uber and taxis in New York City is the greatest example. Oh, that'll never happen here. Oh, it happened here. And you just can't fight things. You need to be open to looking at things a different way. Um, I feel like AI, I don't believe that AI will ever replace a photographer. um, can they create something almost the same or the same as what a photographer did? Maybe, but are you really going to I mean, maybe not in 5 years, maybe in 20 years you would. Are you really going to trust a computer to capture your biggest day, or are you going to trust someone that's done it 50, 60, 1,000 times? I don't think that things like that are going to be changed. I think that AI might be able to, help, you know, this is what if you describe to AI what you want your wedding to look like, what you want the altar to look like, what you want the place of the reception to look like, and you tell AI and it can draw you different things. I believe that for certain can be handed to a planner and being like, this is what I want to do, better than whatever's out there today. I don't have any doubt that that will be the case because why not, right? That's not even that hard to see. Um, you know, but I don't I feel like people still, you know, are going to want a photographer, are going to want a videographer. I think that AI helps with that. You know, I know photographers are already using AI. Something's in the picture you don't want, erase it, gone, like it was never there. AI fills in the blank very, very nicely, as if it was real. Um, you know, but I don't know going forward, shaping things. People need a planner. Like a bride needs to bounce ideas off of somebody. She's not going to bounce ideas off of AI. AI can, if you give AI the directions, it'll give you what you're looking for. Um, to produce it and to do that kind of stuff, I don't know. But again, you know, I'm just not the right person to ask, I don't think. I'm sorry I can't answer the question.
That's okay. I think you gave
Um,
a great answer. I think, we need to be open to however people start to use this in the planning process and the production process. And, we can't, I think the fact that we can't predict it is a testament to how fast the technology is moving and how unpredictable it can be. Um, I have a couple last few questions. I know your co-founder is your brother. I would love to touch on how that how did that originate that you guys both decided you wanted to build this specific product? I know it started in campus tours, but how did that originate, and what does that look like in terms of dividing roles and responsibilities, decision making, and the overlap of working with family?
well, I've even in my finance days, I always worked with my brother. We come from a very, very, very close knit family. I know that people a lot of times say, "Oh, I can't work with my brother," or it's just I wouldn't work with anybody other than my brother as my partner. Our skill sets are in entirely different things. I'm better on the sales side, he's better on the logistics side and on the back office side. But to tell you how it is, I trust no one like I trust my brother. Um, you know, and there's no one I'd rather be in business with than my brother. I hope he feels the same. I think he does. But that's it. We've never had a problem working together. We went to the same college together. I'm 2 years older. We worked in finance together. We built companies before together, and this is just the next step of it. This one is exciting because it can be so big, but working with my brother is when I brought this idea to my brother, he's like, "Let's roll, let's do it." He got it right away. He's like, he looked at all the numbers that I was showing him. He's like, "What are we waiting for? Let's do it." Again, we don't really the risk part we don't care about. Well, we care, but like it was worth taking, and we've worked together before. Again, I don't know. There's no one else that I would rather have as my partner. Period.
That's amazing. And I think, it is unique that you guys are able to work together for such a stretch of, your lives and history through many ventures. And I think that's a dynamic that oftentimes could go in a number of different directions if, you're blending family with business. So the fact that you guys have been able to make it work is amazing. How did you guys think about capital and bootstrapping versus raising early capital in the business? And was that a decision that you had to make, or were you always very clear on the fact that, you wanted to bootstrap and you wanted to take this all the way without any early capital injection to the business?
The in the very beginning, we went to our family and friends, our close family and friends, and we said to them, "This is an idea. That's all it is. If you want to invest, great. If you don't want to invest, no hard feelings, because this is not what we're into." We raised a little bit of money, and we started with that, and we built that money into almost right away becoming self-sustained as a company with the colleges, and especially when the sports got involved, it became, we became plenty profitable. Um, when this Reloom happened, and we're like, just like you said before, how are we going to scale this? We need to build a bunch of robots. We need to train people. Then we went back to our original investors and said, do you want to double up at your investment? But you were at this valuation. Now we're up here. Do you want to double up what you put in and get more shares not equal to what you got originally? And every investor said yes. We took on a couple more, again, 1% investors. We haven't sold like a big slug of it or anything. It's a big dilemma. One of our investors is another very close friend of mine, big hedge fund energy guy. And he's like, look, as far as I'm concerned, the valuation is here. So we're not going to even think about raising money unless we're up there. I'm like, well, how do you get to that valuation? He's like, 2027 sales are going to be this. We're going to get triple that. I'm like, 2027 sales. I'm like, we're learning a new business. But, I would rather not take the money and not lose my friend. I'm like, fine, we're going to go with it. The one of the greatest things about this is that who am I in business with? My closest friends, my brother, all the people that matter most to me in my life are involved in this business for me. So I'm not going to do anything that's going to cause any waves. If someone's not comfortable with something, we're just going to keep moving. We're in a good position. We feel very, very strong. And it's fun having conference call with your friends. You talk about business, but these are people that you generally do care about. And it adds to the whole experience of what we're trying to do here.
That's amazing. And I think, it is very interesting to hear about how you so strategically brought on capital, and the capital that you did bring on was, again, a strategic move when you knew that you had to pivot, and you didn't rush towards, getting an injection of capital in the early days, right? So I think that is a really interesting piece of advice in terms of how people can think about raising versus bootstrapping and when the right time is to raise. To close us out, what is advice that you would give founders who are entering industries or want to enter industries where maybe they don't have the background or they don't have the expertise? How do they go about building and not only a product, but building relationships and credibility and knowledge in a space where perhaps they didn't come from, or their background is in something completely different?
What has worked for me as it pertains to that question is, if you're going into some new industry and you're meeting new people, you need to be very, very aware that whatever industry you're coming to now, most likely doesn't work or run as the other industry you're coming from. So be very mindful of that, and be very, very, aware of how people's feelings might be different in this industry versus that industry. Number one. Number two, if you're going into a new industry, you need to come with something that's going to knock people's socks off, or else you don't have a chance. I will. Part of the research process is make sure this is something that they absolutely will go gaga for. The main reason of the success of Reloom is just because of our clients and the planners' reactions to it. They go crazy. There's no reason why other people won't go crazy. If they're like, "Oh, wow, that's all right," how are you going to break in and get people to recommend your product when it's just the same as the others? So, the most important part is to accept and be very, very respectful of the current of the new industry that you're going into. Be humble about it. You don't know it. You don't know how people act there. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know anything. Be totally amenable to their schedules. You're new, not them, right? You're trying to go into their crowd. So, be as generous as you can possibly be just to be allowed into the discussion. And then if you are allowed into the discussion, make sure you're coming correct. You have to come with something that's going to be impactful to them, something that they feel they're willing to risk everything that they've worked for to this point and offer your service to their clients. You have to have A and B. If you don't have A, you'll never get in the door. And if you don't have B, you'll never make a sale. You need both of them. And if you do that enough, what happens is it kind of grows on itself, because if one big planner is doing it, that big planner will call his or her friend and say, "You want to work with this guy. He's a good guy. They're respectful. They do everything the right way, very professional." And that's how your business can grow very, very quickly. So I think it's A plus B is the answer, I think.
I think that is a great piece of advice for any budding entrepreneurs or founders who are interested in getting into spaces where maybe they don't have a background. It's something that I myself did, and I think navigating that can be quite challenging. So, a great piece of advice and a great note to end us off on. I really appreciate you coming on, and this has been so great to hear your story, get to share it with others, and dive into the process and the journey that you've been on in building Reloom. Can you let everybody know where to find you and where they can find Reloom?
Yeah, our website is Reloom VR, like virtual reality. So it's ReloomVR.com. On Instagram is at Reloom VR. Those are the two places. Yeah, and contact us. We're always happy to talk. It's been a great ride so far.
Thank you, Zvi. This was so great.